universe is a huge place. It's so big that scientists have never found an end to it. They've defined our galaxy, and they've identified that there are countless other galaxies, but they've never found an end to the space they occupy. The thought of such vastness causes a man to realize how small he is relative to time and space. When we look downward, we see an endless universe of microscopic particles that we know exist because we've seen them through powerful microscopes. But an end to particle sizes has never been found. Even atoms have parts. Science has identified particles smaller than atoms that they call quarks. But is there anything smaller than quarks? Yes. They're called muons, particles that hold quarks together by some unseen force, much like the association of protons and neutrons in the atom. Whether looking outward in space or downward through a powerful microscope, the conclusion is the same. The universe must be endless and highly organized. It can be a daunting thought. Elements have been found that make up the substances we see around us, and we know that the elements can't be destroyed. They can be changed by the addition or subtraction of other elements that they associate with, but they're always there in their eternal or elemental form, manifesting themselves by chemically or physically reacting or cooperating with other elements. But they're never destroyed. Particles of elements have been seen moving around seemingly on their own, being attracted to or repelled by other particles, depending on their polarity and momentum. Seeing that happen through a microscope causes us to see a resemblance with the behavior of the planets in the universe that are acting much the same way. Polarity and a degree of gravity or magnetism seems to be the unseen forces that control movement and proximities between particles and planets in relationship with one another, regardless of their size. There are a lot of mysterious creatures on this planet. We know that the Earth is in a special location in the universe that makes it possible for life to have all that is needed to sustain it. None of the other planets that are seen in our galaxy have that capacity. An important part of the environment needed to sustain life on a planet is an abundance of water and oxygen. A temperature within a particular range must also be maintained for living things to keep from burning up or freezing to death. In order for such an environment to be provided, a specific proximity and a specific orbital pattern in relationship with the sun have to be sustained. How did the Earth get so special? It appears that the Earth, and all of the life that is in it, both flora and fauna, can be seen as an organization of the elements. Okay, that's cool. So what caused all of this to be so organized? Even if it is simply evolution or happenstance from the chaos of a Big Bang, it seemed logical that some being of higher intelligence had to have organized all of this. It seems that millions of highly organized creatures and the precise coordination of all the flora and fauna on the Earth had to be put in place by some being of extremely high intelligence. Albert Einstein and Niels Bohr carried on a friendly argument for a long time about that stuff. Niels Bohr was a proponent of quantum theory, while Einstein argued that there had to be an intelligent being, even a God, to organize all of this stuff, and that in his words, God doesn't play dice. While quantum physics can only find its origin from chaos. Quantum physics owes its development to mathematics. I call it mortal mathematics because even the best math known to man can only measure things in 3 dimensions using 90-degree angles, x, y, and z. Measurements can only be made by mortal math in approximations. Otherwise, the exact circumference of a circle or the exact volume of a sphere could be defined by it. That's why pi is used to measure round things. 3.14 and onward, adding numbers to infinity with no stopping place. Mortal math, with all of its organization and its wonderful creations, has its limitations in 3 dimensions, while time and space appear to be non-dimensional and go on forever. What Einstein saw in the development of his theory of relativity was endless time and space. If it were a college course, it could be called Eternity 101. E equals mc squared also includes the component of time, but I'll reserve that for another discussion and another time. No pun intended. Now, in an effort to get to the point, let me see if I can share my thoughts without unnecessary complication. So how does this stuff have anything to do with human existence? What does it have to do with the purpose and existence of a man? As a place to start, men wouldn't be here if such an organization of the elements were not in place before he showed up on the planet. Logic dictates the importance of the following advice to the traveler. So what is a man? Well, if you look at a man through chemistry and physics, he's a combination of the elements. The human body is about 20% carbon and about 70% of 2 elemental hydrogen particles mysteriously clinging to a single elemental particle of oxygen. The combination of these 2 elements, hydrogen and oxygen, make up the most abundant substance on Earth. We call it water. An organization of carbon and water, along with portions of numerous other elements, make up the body of a man. So is that all a man is? Just a combination of elements? Or is there more to a man than that? It's got to be more than that, when considering his ability to think and act, and to move his head, hands, feet, eyes, and other parts in a way that he chooses in order to make decisions, accomplish specific tasks, and pay attention to and to act or react to certain sets of circumstances. With that in mind, there must be more to a man, and to other living creatures as well, than just an organization of the elements. In addition to elemental organization, there is also recognized a generous degree of intelligence. We have identified that the elements that things and creatures are made up of are indestructible and are always around somewhere in some condition or another. But what about intelligence? It seems logical that when the body of a man was created by a God with superintelligence, the organization of elements into a body would be a useless exercise without the inclusion of intelligence. God also, with his higher level of intelligence, recognized that it's impossible to be more intelligent without helping others to do the same. For a plan such as this to succeed, there had to be an endless degree of charity. There's no comfort in being all alone at the top of anything. Only loneliness, uselessness, and misery. We see all around us that intelligence exists in degrees, depending on the capacity of each of the creatures on the planet. So is intelligence also elemental, existing somewhere in some condition or another in a certain invisible place? Or is intelligence better defined as a gauge or capacity of something more substantial, such as an eternal being or a living spirit? So it is not intelligence that is elemental, but a spirit, an eternal and substantial being with a measured degree of intelligence. If the elements are always in existence, then the element of spirit must also be always in existence somewhere in endless space. It can't be seen in our three-dimensional world as a substance, but it plainly must substantially exist somewhere, or every living creature as we know them would be lifeless. So, when God created man as he did the earth by an organization of the elements, he had to introduce the eternal element of spirit in his creation, in order to give it life and purpose. Did he create the spirits? No. If they exist eternally, he couldn't create them any more than he could create the elements that were used to organize the earth and the universe. But he saw these spirits in need of further improvement, and it is reasonable to assume that with this in mind, he created an opportunity for them to be added upon. The purpose of all of this seemingly complicated exercise had to be to establish a condition for spirits to have an opportunity to increase their intelligence. They would have the opportunity to choose for themselves the valuable things of mortal life, rejecting those that would make them impaired or even less intelligent. So the glory of God is intelligence, and intelligence exists in degrees. An essential part of increased intelligence is charity. Having an endless degree of charity, and having had more experience than the other spirits, God wanted to share his experience with them to become more intelligent like he is. It is impossible to increase intelligence without taking responsibility. Self-reliance must also be increased for individual growth to occur. The spirits of men are made stronger in a mortal condition by their being tempted by an opposite force that reduces their intelligence if they choose to follow that force on a downward path and adopt a lazy existence. Calm seas never a good sailor made. Without opposition, it is impossible to gain greater intelligence and to become stronger through proper choices, self-reliance, and personal responsibility. So how does a man with a specific and unique personality make beneficial use of an earthly existence in the universe? He does so by choosing and acting responsibly, and by following the example of a loving God who organized this world for the purpose of his improvement. God created the body of man by an organization of eternal elements for a specific purpose, not just a mortal body that oxidizes and deteriorates over time, but as a temporary vessel for his eternal spirit to establish a greater degree of intelligence by his choices and conquests through his mortal experience. I'm often asked if I'm staying out of trouble. My answer is always no. If you're staying out of trouble, you're not doing anything. If a man is determined to gain strength, he'll have to struggle. Hard times make you great. Be anxiously engaged in a good cause and be tempered by the hard times, added upon, and improved in the process of following the example of a living and loving God and by making good decisions. Babylon, being on the downward and lonely road, will fall. Don't you fall with it. I'm Mike Pickett. I hope to see you next week on my next podcast. In the meantime, stay righteous and sleep well tonight, knowing that you're in good hands. And by the way, that your savings are in your own custody.